Hello and welcome to Election Night Live on Gnat-tv. I'm Andrew McKeever, the news director at Gnat-tv's News Project. It's a pleasure to have you with us tonight on this historic evening. Whether you're joining us on one of our television channels or on live stream from our website or on Roku or Apple TV or our YouTube channel, we're glad to have you with us this evening. We'll be following the election results live tonight and reporting them as we get them, as well as doing our best to analyze and make sense about what's going on. We already have a few results that have come in. We'll try to get to them as soon as we can. But first, just to kind of lay out the evening ahead for you, we're going to have we're fortunate tonight to have a group of panelists here who will help us navigate our way through this evening. Really pleased to welcome tonight Jeff Wilson, the former Manchester town manager and also three-term state representative from the Bennington 4 district. We'll be talking about that race a little bit tonight as well. Also great to have with us tonight Cherise Forbes, who many of you will remember from her work at the Manchester Journal and Bennington Banner. She is now a writer and reporter with the Chester Telegraph. And Cherise, we're really grateful to have you with us tonight. You can bring some of that mountain town fever to the show as well. We're also hoping to be joined by John O'Keefe, the Manchester town manager. He may be getting in here in a few minutes. But anyway, we are going to also have several special guests joining us over the course of the evening. Very shortly, we're going to be looking to be having two of the candidates who are running in the Bennington 4 district. That's the district, of course, that includes Manchester, Arlington, Sandgate, and a part of Sunderland. Representative Kathleen James and her running mate Seth Bongartz will be joining us in a moment to kind of talk to us a little bit about what it's been like on the campaign trail in this unusual election year. After that, we will be planning to have a group of local students joining us around 8:30, and that's a part of the show I think you'll definitely all want to hang around for. We have 7 students from 3 of our local schools. From Burn Barton, Long Trail School, and Arlington Memorial High School, and they'll be sharing with us their perspectives and thoughts on what were some of the issues that were of paramount importance to them. Around 9 o'clock, we'll return to our regular panel. We'll also be joined around that time, shortly after that, by Representative Cynthia Browning, who's the other incumbent state representative in Bennington 4. We'll also have a visit from, if all goes according to plan, former Governor James Douglas will be here around 9:15, and then we'll have Representative Linda Joy Sullivan joining us at around 9:30. And last but hardly least, we'll be also happy to have with us Bob Stannard, local former state representative, I should say first of all, and keen observer of local political phenomena. So we'll be looking forward to that. And just to kind of get things started, I guess, Jeff, Cherise, what are some of the things that you're going to be looking at tonight as we go through the evening? Any races in particular, any issues that are sort of grabbing your attention? Jeff, get us started.
Yeah, I'm looking at 3 races, Andrew, and thanks again for having me. It's been great the last couple times we did this, and I think it's very informative. But the 3 races are on a statewide basis. The lieutenant governor's race, I think that could be a very close race, probably the only race on a statewide basis that would be close. And looking at the returns so far at the Secretary of State's website, we had about 58,000 votes in, and it is indeed close, neck and neck. The other race, as you mentioned, is the Bennington 4 race, and we'll be talking to folks who are in the running there. The question will be who is going to be the one who doesn't make the cut. We have 3 people running for 2 slots, 2 incumbents plus Seth Bongartz. And we got an inkling of the results before when we were talking before the program went on. It looked like there was a pretty good margin in Manchester for Kathleen and Seth, but that's probably to be expected since they're both from Manchester. But it was a huge margin and bigger than I anticipated, simply because Cynthia is indeed an incumbent. And finally, the state Senate race, which I didn't think there was going to be a race initially, but you have Brian Campion and Dick Sears, both incumbents, going against Meg Hansen and Mike Hall. And I was curious there, and still am, I guess, to some degree, as to whether or not Mike and Meg would pull a bunch of votes in the North Shire, since they're both from the northern part of the county. But it looked like, from what we heard so far, that the margin in Manchester was pretty big as far as Campion and Sears over the two Republican candidates. So those are the three races. I think it's going to be an interesting evening. And obviously, on the national scene is the big one.
And Cherise, what's your takeaway in the evening so far?
Yeah, well, like most of us, I'm watching the national election very closely, but here in Vermont, the lieutenant governor race is also very interesting. Molly Gray has some ties to the mountain towns here as a graduate of Stratton Mountain School at their Nordic program in 2002. Up here, Linda Joy Sullivan and Kelly Piala are both running unopposed, but Tom Bach is running against Chester Alden, a Republican. So we'll see how that race goes soon. There's no results in on that yet. And of course, Anne-Marie Christensen from the Windsor 2 district is not running for re-election. So we've got 3 candidates vying for that one seat up near Chester Andover. So that'll be very interesting to watch as well.
All right. Well, I guess without any further ado, perhaps we should bring on our first 2 guests here. Representative Kathleen James and Seth Bongartz, I believe, are waiting in the waiting room. If we can bring them onto the screen here. This is, as you can all tell, is a new way of doing this for us. We used to be able to sort of have people in a studio or call in on a telephone. We're doing it all on Zoom tonight, and it's been kind of interesting. Anyway, I see Representative James is there, and there's Mr. Bongartz. All right. Sorry for the slight delay getting to you folks. A few technical issues there right at the beginning, but anyway, glad to have you with us now. And I guess first question is simply, what was it like campaigning this year in this sort of unusual context, I guess? You weren't able to go out and knock on doors like you might have done in a different year. What was that all like?
I don't know which one to go first, but I'll just say it was very odd. I'm used to running the same way everybody else has, which is always done it, which is go out knocking door to door and really hear what's going on. And there was something almost a little eerie about it, because we really couldn't see and talk to people the way we normally would. So it was really, we could gain some sense of what we thought was going on, but not the way that you normally can. I don't know what else you want to add to that, Kathleen?
Just the same thing. I mean, you know, my first race in 2018, I knocked on hundreds and hundreds of doors, and I loved it. And so this race felt, you know, we worked really hard, and, you know, we made phone calls for sure. But a lot of the race kind of took place in some ways kind of on social media. We sent a lot of emails out and tried to post a lot of our stuff on our websites and sending out e-blasts. But, you know, even all the phone calls we made, it's different. You know, a lot of times you wind up leaving messages and stuff. And so I really missed knocking on doors, and it just took some of the fun out of it, really. But still, it was good. You know, making phone calls was fun, and it actually meant that Seth and I had more time in some ways to focus on our platform. I don't know if you agree with that, Seth, but it really made us focus a little bit more on our message and our vision, just because we had more time to do that. So maybe that was a side benefit, but I missed doors, and you know, hope that, you know, if we're back here ever doing this again, that would be something that I would really look forward to.
I was just wondering, what were, as you were able to go around and meet people at the Honkin' Waves or whatever other events you were able to do, what were some of the issues that you heard from voters about that were on their minds? Was there 1 or 2 things that kind of kept coming up, or was it a whole smattering of different issues that you heard about?
We didn't really have a chance to meet people at the Honkin' Waves just because of COVID. You know, I mean, people are keeping their distance as they should. You know, I can tell you from the huge volume of email that I have been getting and continue to get, that everything right now is about COVID and the economic recovery, and people are worried about their businesses and their finances, and how our communities and how our state and how our region is going to recover. And that's what it's all about. That's the overarching issue, and that's the issue that people as individuals are worried about. That's what it is.
That's what it is. Yep.
Well, all right. I will certainly be watching the results in your respective races there very closely throughout the evening. Sounds like we've got some numbers in from Manchester already. We'll be waiting to hear from Sandgate and Arlington and Sunderland as well. And the night is but young, I guess. So ways to go, but I'm sure that by the time we close up shop here sometime after 10 o'clock, we'll have some final results, or pretty close to final results, to share with our viewers. And thanks again for both making the time this evening to be with us and share some of your thinking about it.
Andrew, for what it's worth, Sunderland is actually in.
Oh, what are the numbers?
And it was very close.
Let's see.
I had them up just a second ago.
Here we go. I've got it. In Sunderland, wait.
Seth Bongartz, 207. Cynthia Browning, 257. Kathleen James, 233.
All right. Well,
So
that's
very,
close.
very close, all within 50 votes.
All right. Well, we still got a few more communities to hear from. So as soon as we get some information from there, we'll bring that to you and share the numbers and everything. And again, Seth, Kathleen, thanks an awful lot for taking the time out of an eventful evening to be with us. And good luck the rest of the way.
Thanks, Andrew.
Thanks.
Good night, everybody.
Okay. Bye, everybody.
Bye. Thanks.
Well, that is some pretty close numbers from Sunderland. I'm kind of that's sort of intriguing. It'll be interesting to see what the Arlington numbers are when those arrive. I stopped by there. They were voting at the American Legion Hall there in Arlington today. Apparently, very heavy turnout. And all the voting areas I went to, and the town clerks I spoke to today, said that there was a large in-person vote today. People lined up at 10 o'clock or whenever the polls opened to cast their ballots in person. And in addition to it being, obviously a lot of votes that were cast by mail before today. So we could be heading for a record turnout in an election year. I guess 2016 was the last, what is the current champion when it comes to turnout, but from all indications, it sounds like we're certainly going to be doing pretty darn close to that as well. It'll be interesting to see how that early, if there's a way to kind of tell whether or not the early votes and the in-person votes today were kind of different. I know on the national level, that's been a bit of a talking point as well. I guess just to kind of we have a few minutes before we're going to have to take our first break and bring on our panel of students here. But I guess I just wanted to jump back a bit to that state Senate race, Jeff, that you mentioned earlier. I was impressed by the number of lawn signs that Mike Hall, the former police chief in Manchester, had out around up here in the North Shire. Anyway, I haven't been able to get down to Bennington that much, or the southern part of the county, a whole lot lately. But he certainly seemed to make quite a bit of an effort, and I'm going to be interesting to see how the numbers play out.
Yeah, I was also impressed by the number of signs he had out in the North Shire. And initially, I thought he would not do too well, simply because he got in the race so late. We had a lot of signs out. But again, looking at the Manchester vote, and Mike was the chief there, worked for the Manchester Police Department for a long time. Manchester went big time for both Sears and Campion. So the signs may be a little misleading. We'll have to see how things come in Sunderland. That's where Mike lives. Meg lives in Manchester. Apparently didn't help her on the home front being a resident here. But we'll see how he does in Sunderland and Arlington. But I think it's going to be a big win for Brian and Dick. On the Bennington 4 race, my comment there at this point is, given the fact that Seth and Kathleen won so big in Manchester, and the race being tight in what has traditionally been a stronghold of Cynthia, Sunderland, as well as Sandgate in Arlington, which she represented as a sole rep back in the day before redistricting. That's a tight race in Sunderland. That indicates to me that she's not going to have the ability to make up those votes that she lost in Manchester. So I've been wrong before, and I'll be wrong again, but my prediction is it's going to be Kathleen and Seth to win that race.
How big of an issue do you think was that whole business that went down in the legislature back in March around that remote voting call? Representative Browning, called the speaker to account to say, hey, we can't change the rules here without a full quorum of everyone of people present. I mean, I know it's been pointed to as kind of one of those moves that, the vote didn't go in her favor, I guess, and then she lost her position on the Ways and Means Committee. I guess I just wondered, do you think that was a big issue in this race, or was
I think it was huge. I think that was probably the biggest political misjudgment that she's ever made in her 14-year career, because it really got a lot of attention, not only in the district, but also statewide. And I think Seth has said this, that this is the reason he got in the race, because it was poor judgment. And he just said, we can't have somebody who's going to represent our district with that poor judgment. Now, obviously there's two sides to that story, but I think it turned out to be a big issue. Because without it, I think Cynthia might have been unopposed. It would have been possibly just Kathleen and Cynthia running again as incumbents.
Mm. What's your sense of the local and state elections that we're following this evening?
Well, I guess we'll start off with the local state representative race, which is shaping up, I think, to be one of the more interesting ones in the state, where we have longtime incumbent Cynthia Browning running in a 2-seat district for re-election as an independent rather than a Democrat. And she's challenging a team of 2 Democrats who are running together, Seth Bongartz and also incumbent Kathleen James. I gotta think it's going to be a difficult path, but there's one there for Representative Browning. She has wide popularity in her hometown of Arlington and in the other 2 towns in the district, Sunderland and Sandgate, but it's going to be challenged to see if she can overcome the popularity of James and Bongartz in Manchester, which of course is the largest town in the district. And the other challenge that Representative Browning doesn't have is that she doesn't have a sponge candidate to sort of pick up that second vote that Bennington 4 district representatives get in this situation. So if people don't want to waste a vote, they're going to wind up casting one for one of her opponents. So that's a challenge as well. She's run the hardest campaign I think she has ever run before, maybe except for her first time. And her opponents have also run a very formidable campaign with Kathleen James and Seth Bongartz doing a lot of sine waves and hard work. So very interesting race. I think it's going to be a tough night for Representative Browning is my personal prediction. I have great admiration for her, but it's a tough path to victory, I got to say, when you're in that situation.
And the other interesting race we're following pretty closely is the lieutenant governor's race. That seems to be a nip and tuck affair. The polls seem to show within the margin of error kind of race going on. What's your sense there? Do you think Scott Millen has a chance to pull this one out against newcomer Molly Gray?
Yeah, I think Scott Millen does have a chance to pull it off. I think Molly Gray has struggled a lot with even consolidating her Democratic support. I mean, here we are, we're recording this a day out from the election, and the only only Democratic statewide candidate who Bernie Sanders hasn't endorsed is Molly Gray. A third of the Democratic caucus in the Senate, Vermont Senate, refused to endorse her. That's not a place you want to be in as a Democrat nominee for statewide office heading into the general election. Forgetting that she's going to need to pull some independent and Republican support as well to pull this one over the top. Meanwhile, Scott Millen has gotten endorsements from local Democrat leaders like Representative Linda Joy Sullivan, former Senator Bob Hartwell, and several others, in addition to Republican support. So I think he has a good chance to pull this one off. We'll have to wait and see what the voters decide, and we'll be hearing the results of this as this airs. But I think it's going to be an awfully close race, and if I had to guess, I think the direction goes a slight in favor of Milne.
So you're talking to us now from Florida, which of course is one of the big battleground states in the national presidential election. seems like a kind of a toss-up situation going on down there as well. What's your read on things from Florida, just to kind of veer off into the national picture?
Indeed, yeah. Florida is not only a swing state, they call it the swing state. And, in this situation, I think if Biden gets Florida, it's over. There's no way Trump could bounce back from that. But if Trump gets Florida, he has a path here. Honestly, looking at it, the whole picture nationally and the battleground states that are up for grabs, I think, and trying to make an educated guess about polling error, I think actually Trump probably has a good chance tomorrow night. That's just my independent projection I'm trying to make, but I wouldn't be surprised if it went the other way. I think Trump is favored to win Florida. I think he's favored to win Ohio, Iowa, North Carolina. I think he'll probably pull it off in Arizona. And then in that situation, he really just needs to win one of the three outstanding: Pennsylvania, Michigan, Wisconsin, or Minnesota, I think, and he'll get it to victory. I don't think there's a lot of enthusiasm for Biden, even among his supporters, and that's going to be a challenge. And I don't think he's going to be able to replicate the minority turnout we saw during the Obama years, not only among African-American voters, but among Hispanic voters as well, which is a crucial voting bloc in Florida. So I think it's going to be a long night, but I'm predicting a narrow win for Donald Trump. We'll see what happens, though. It's going to be a tough night. And then I just add, meanwhile, I think we're going to see a blowout in the Vermont governor's race, clear victory for Governor Scott. And one more local race I'll throw in a prediction on is Bennington Senate. I think that Senator Sears, Senator Campion will probably be reelected handily in that race, but we'll have to wait and see.
We will indeed. Well, Hayden, thanks again for sharing your thoughts with us. Really appreciate your taking the time to be with us and weigh in on all of this. It'll be, like you say, I'm sure, a long evening.
Yes, indeed. Thank you, Andrew. Always good to join you and join GNAT.
We're coming up now on our first little break. We are going to be back in a few minutes with our student panel. So you definitely don't want to move your browser anywhere or change your channel or whatever else you do in the live stream era. But anyway, there's going to be a very interesting conversation, I'm sure, with the 7 students, and I think we'll all learn a lot. So hang tight. We'll be back in a few minutes, and we'll see you then.
Hi, everyone. It's Tammy at Gnat-tv. I want to thank everybody who's working so hard to keep our community together. I want to remind you that Gnat-tv belongs to you, and we're here for you. You can participate by watching our channels on cable, watching our YouTube channel. You can watch on our website. You can also watch on Roku and Apple TV, and you can listen on our podcast. If you're interested in sharing your story and your videos, send any video that you'd like us to air to programs@gnat-tv.org, and we'll put it on the air for you. You can also visit our website for more information about how to share your story, gnat-tv.org. Thank you, everybody.
Gnat-tv brings you essential coverage of events across Bennington County. Whether it's the Putnam Block Project or a community meeting, we bring you not only news, but help get the word out about upcoming events so you can plan to be there. From culture to commentary, Gnat-tv has you covered, bringing you the essential information you need. Well, we're back with our panel of students here who are, I'm sure, going to enlighten us all here on what's on some of the minds of the youngest voters who might be entering the picture very soon. Really pleased to welcome to our show tonight 7 students. 3 of them are from Burton Academy. We're pleased to have with us tonight Erin Norton, Ellis Glaizer, and Ellery Stahler. And from Long Trail School, great to welcome Benjamin Parks, Austin Carr, and Noel Schlageter. And from Arlington Memorial High School, I'd like to welcome Noah Diedrich. Folks, thanks again for making the time to be with us tonight to share your thoughts with us on what are some of the issues that are kind of paramount in your thinking. I guess, Noah, if I can, let me start with you. What were some of the big questions that kind of, were front and center for you and your friends at Arlington as you talked about the presidential race? What were some of the issues that kept coming up for discussion?
I think first and foremost was definitely climate change. I mean, you look at within the next 10 years and we could be seeing the serious consequences of how we've treated the planet up until now. So that's, I think, it's an existential crisis, and I think it's a lot on a lot of our peers' minds. Secondly, I think would be the coronavirus response, because at Arlington we are in person right now. We're hybrid, but there's a lot of places all over the country that are remote, and I'm sure people would like to be in school. I mean, that's beneficial to students. Okay,
let's see, Erin Norton. Let's go to you now. What were some of the issues that were front and center for you?
So since I am a woman, women's rights are a huge issue for me. The confirmation of Amy Coney Barrett was extremely alarming, extremely concerning. And this election going forth is extremely concerning for me, because I feel as though my rights as a young woman have never been so much on the line. So I'm looking for solutions to, if, like, let's say Trump gets elected, how can we continue to advocate for our rights as women and that sort of thing. And then secondly, definitely climate change. I agree wholeheartedly with Noah, and it's imperative that we get our act together and to go along with the new Green Deal, the Green New Deal. That's extremely important, and as well as the coronavirus response as well, since that is the most pressing issue I believe we face in present times, and it does require quite a lot of immediate response, and it requires a lot of work to solve this issue. So yeah.
Okay, Ellis Glaizer, what's uppermost in your mind?
So I think it's kind of hard to narrow down issues, especially when there's so much going on right now. But I think overall, I would agree with what the previous 2 students have said. And the upshot really is that climate change should be at the forefront of all of our minds for the next, as long as it takes to address it. And we have not been able to address it. So this election is really, really important for that, as I'm sure everyone knows. I think other than that, though, I think that race relations are also at the forefront of everyone's minds, especially with Black Lives Matter protests and the inaction that's been going on with all of the new younger generations, social media presence, and trying to encourage more action. So to a lot of people, especially in my generation, I think that that's right up there with climate change.
Okay, and Ellery Stahler, the last member of our BBA delegation here. What's top of mind for you?
Yeah, so of course I would echo climate change, but there's obviously other topics as well. Kind of talking or building a little bit on what Erin was saying with the confirmation of Amy Coney Barrett. Another thing that we see is that the Affordable Care Act could be on the line in healthcare. And we're in a pandemic right now where we have rampant job loss. And with so many people who have healthcare through their employers, that just means rampant unemployment as well, where as of 2018, we already had 30 million uninsured people in America. So I think we really need to try and cut that down to the knees. We need to try and rather that getting rid of healthcare right now is just such a horrible idea. So we need to do something in order to, help those people out that are in need, help those uninsured Americans right now. So healthcare access, yeah.
Okay, let's move over to the Long Trail School contingent here. Benjamin Park, what's uppermost in your mind as we enter this evening?
I think in addition to widespread access to contraception and whatever issues related to women's rights, I think a lot of people, especially my age, are particularly concerned with like issues of racial justice. I think our country has a long history of deep systemic racial injustice, and I think our current strides to address that are at the forefront of a lot of young people's minds.
Okay, let's go next then to Austin Carr. Austin, I know you're there someplace.
Yeah, I'm right here. Yeah, for me, I think the obvious answer here is definitely climate change. But as a young man applying to college, I think that I'm also looking at kind of equity in terms of the college application process and how we're approaching the college application process, including student debt, which is going to be a huge factor for all of us, I think, in the next 10 to 20 years even.
Yeah, no question. That's a big hurdle. One that, frankly, was not as anywhere near as big an issue back in the ancient days when I went to college, many decades ago. Okay, Noel Schlageter, what's just to finish this part of it off? What's uppermost on your mind?
So I'd really like to primarily echo everything that everybody's stated so far, especially in terms of climate change. I think that that's a massive issue. But broadly, what I was going to mention going into this was broader economic policy is extremely important to me, because overall, I feel like a lot of the inequalities in society that currently exist can be boiled down to a prevalence and reliance on corporatism and hierarchy in our society. So I would like to, at least if I could vote, direct my attention towards the candidate most likely to promote economic equity and access to better forms of healthcare for all Americans and things like that. But again, everything that has been mentioned so far, I wholeheartedly agree is not being addressed by the current administration, and I find it extremely imperative that we work to address it as a country in the future.
Okay, so just to kind of follow up a little bit then on the climate change side of it, you know, I was thinking back earlier today to last year where there was the climate change march in Manchester, and we had Greta Thunberg, the Swedish teenager who was leading the charge on that, and I find myself wondering what needs to happen in order to kind of maintain that momentum to kind of keep moving things forward, because there's a tremendous amount of what you might call sort of pushback, I don't know, or at least there's going to be winners and losers in all of this. And do you think it's going to be possible for folks, you know, people in general, but also those of you who will be living through this period, we assume, how do you keep that momentum going? What needs to happen, do you think, in order for this not just to be a sudden kind of you know, moment that kind of passes by when people kind of move on to other things? And anyone can feel free to respond at any point. So dive in.
I think one of the most important things that needs to happen is, if it's possible to rejoin the Paris Accord. It was a huge mistake to leave it for whatever reason that happened. What should happen is young people like us should continue advocating for this, and we need to find solutions. We need to advocate for these plans that are put in place by potential candidates, and we need to continue just understanding that science is science, and that is the truth, and we need to trust that regardless of what anyone else says. I think it's ridiculous how people have decided to push science aside, not listen to it, try to minimize it almost, and I just think it is so important that we don't do that, and we need to listen to these people who have been studying this for years. It's beyond me how people can't believe that.
Any of the rest of you want to weigh in on that point, or
Yeah, sure. If I could just add a little bit, I'd say in addition to the withdrawal from the Paris Accord, the Trump administration in the US has kind of just broadly rolled back a lot of environmental advancements that we've accomplished, the US has accomplished under other administrations. So I'd say that going forward, regardless of the outcome of this election, it's really very important that we even kind of attempt to reverse those reversals, so to speak. to make up lost ground, because regardless of what's going on with this crisis, we definitely shouldn't be losing ground, even if we're just being stagnant.
Yeah, if I may add in on that, yeah, especially with the Trump administration, they've defunded the EPA, for example, and cut back on environmental regulation, especially with air pollution, water pollution, basically every degree of pollution. And yeah, I think what it really comes down to is that we need to just continue to vote. If we can continue to get our voices heard and vote, then we can contribute to this in the long run too.
And one thing you said, Andrew, was that there's going to be winners and losers in all this. Ultimately, we are all going to be losers, like in this generation, if we don't have like a planet that we can live on, like 20, 30, 50 years from now. And like one of the biggest pushbacks to these climate reforms is talking about like the coal industry and just like jobs. But some of the plans that we see right now from Joe Biden, we see that we can actually like build jobs through this by focusing on like electric automobiles and weatherizing homes. It doesn't have to be this thing where we have to sacrifice jobs in order to save the climate. Like we can do both.
I think just pointing back to what Ellery was just pointing out, like the current administration, which a lot of other kids have talked about, is actively not only instituting policy that is against climate progress, but currently campaigning on ideas of anti-renewable energy. Like in Pennsylvania, President Trump is campaigning for not only the preservation, but the expansion of the coal industry. It's not just policy, it's like the ongoing mental idea that is incredibly prevalent across America is being heavily supported over and over again. And without addressing that, we're not even getting to policy. Before we can even really address that, we need to address the idea that's being repeatedly brought up and repeatedly supported by publicly elected officials.
I think beyond climate reform itself, we need to have some sort of governmental reform, because as you see campaigns and congressmen and congresswomen take in big money from corporations, it's really tough to rely on, are they going to listen to the people and what the people want? They're just going to, go to the highest bidder. So I think you need almost some sort of law or something to just kind of make sure that they're doing the right thing for the environment, not the highest bidder.
Yeah, slightly pivoting from what you're saying, Noah, I think in specific reference to like the Citizens United decision, I think a lot of the resistance to like the Green New Deal and more progressive green policies are legislators that are backed by the fossil fuel industry. And I think by us as young people electing legislators that instead of taking money from these massive corporations that destroy the environment and funneling it, I don't know, to efforts that are like seeking to destroy our planet, we should really try to elect legislators and Congress people, and I guess governors too, that actually put human-centered policies that will not further the destruction of our planet.
Yeah, adding on to like the concept of money and climate change and that sort of thing, and also the Green New Deal and that those sorts of plans that people are trying desperately to put into place. A lot of people are saying that they're going to be so extremely expensive, which is true. It's going to cost money. There's no secret about it. But the thing is, climate change is causing a huge loss of money, because if you see how it is like all of these natural disasters, we have to pay money to fix that. That is coming from taxpayer money, that's coming from governmental money. So would you rather fix the situation now with some sort of plan and make money later, right? Or would you just like to lose all of your money, lose the entire planet, how about, without like, and not even try to fix the situation? It would end in chaos if we didn't do at least something. Everything's going to cost money. It's just, we have to be willing to like sacrifice that for our planet, for our well-being.
Yeah. Oh, if you want to go, that's fine.
No, you can go.
All right. To add on to that factor of money, if we really look at it though, down the line, our economy will benefit if we convert now to clean energy. We're going to be making more money, and we're going to be losing less money in terms of the fossil fuel industry in the Middle East, for example, if we start investing now, and if we start investing in companies, for example, I look at like Tesla, for example, with Elon Musk, is developing a gigafactory, for example. 100 gigafactories can provide the entire world with renewable energy. If we invest in that type of technology, we'll be at the head of the economies in the world again.
I think just adding on to what Erin was saying earlier, like there is a reason that repeatedly politicians are being able to campaign upon revitalizing the oil and coal industries, and that's because they keep dying. The idea that economically it's just far more intelligent to invest in these things has repeatedly been proven false. The only reason we're sustaining it is because of a fear mentality that is completely difficult to address, but incredibly prevalent. And for example, I went to a couple of town meetings over the past few years, and a lot of working class Vermonters are afraid of things like carbon taxes that would address either if they are trying to get jobs in non-renewable sources, or if they just have a necessity to rely upon things like oil and coal to heat their houses, to drive their cars. But there's just there's a lack of addressing the public on the actual capabilities of renewable energy in fields that would actually be important to the public, which is the most important fields that it can possibly be in.
I was wondering, what did you all make of the Global Warming Solutions Act that the state legislature passed a couple of months ago? Governor vetoed it. They overrode the veto. That sets forth some fairly ambitious sounding environmental goals to reduce carbon emissions by significant percentages, starting fairly quickly. By 2026, I believe, is the first benchmark. Do you think that's going to be realistic or achievable? Or is it just sort of kind of feel good, legislation that, well, if it works, great, but, if it doesn't, one more time we kind of slip?
Well, if we look at plans that people are trying to put in place in our government currently, we see that these people are trying to set the goal of having net zero carbon emissions by 2050. If we're just talking about the state and being zero carbon emissions or being a bit more environmentally friendly by 2026, I think it's doable. I think we're one of the most open-minded states, and I feel like we're already on our way to do that because we're such an environmentally driven state. I feel like it's not the most unrealistic as long as these people are putting plans in place into how to do that, which I'm sure they are.
Okay, well, we got a few minutes left here. Let me just pivot the conversation a little bit, if I may, to the social media side of things. I'm assuming you folks are all experts in this subject here. And one of the issues that's come up in the presidential race, of course, has been this whole question about whether or not, what role social media, Facebook, Twitter, and organizations like that have to play when it comes to distributing information that may or may not be, shall we say, as factually accurate as it could have been. Do you think that the large social media companies that seem to attract millions of viewers have a responsibility to fact check and maybe delete posts that are published on their platforms that shall we say maybe more opinion driven than fact driven? And we got to that point now where maybe we need to kind of have a closer look at that.
Yeah, so I think it's difficult to draw the distinction between what's social and what's media when you're talking about this. But I think just deleting stuff is a difficult thing to get down because even the companies could have false information on how they're actually regulating the information on their websites. I do think that one of the most effective things that I believe Facebook has started doing with at least some things is labeling things as questionable in their accuracy, which I think is actually a very smart solution because it avoids the argument that it is restricting free speech while also being able to try and at least partially spread accurate information to voter bases. And as we've seen, things like Facebook can have a very large effect on how voters actually act within elections. So any attempt to actually restrict the false information spread is very, very good in my opinion.
Yeah, I agree with that. And ultimately, I think that's probably the most effective solution. I think back to, I think it was probably like a month or two ago, where the president was spreading disinformation on Twitter, and Twitter actually labeled that this was not correct information and then put a link to like the CDC. I think that's really the only way you can handle that situation.
Yeah, you are getting into shaky ground when you start deleting things, like kind of echoing what those guys are saying. I think just by labeling it is probably the best you can do without people getting like enraged about like their First Amendment rights to free speech being restricted on these platforms.
And yeah, to add on to that, I've seen similar things that we've described on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. I mean, there's probably other networks that use those kind of limitations on disinformation. And I really think that elaboration is needed with how companies continue to kind of fact check information, but that seems like that we're headed down the right pathway currently. And I think it's definitely a necessary response to what happened in 2016. Going forward, I would just say that personally, my opinion is that disinformation, information that's not true, is oftentimes spread for a nefarious purpose or to try to manipulate others. So in terms of it falling under free speech, it's not necessarily an expression of one's own beliefs, but an expression of an agenda. So I would say going forward that a lot of people who tend to kind of correlate like the justification of disinformation being allowed on sites tend to come from positions that would kind of benefit from the prevalence of disinformation. And I think that's something that the average voter should kind of look into and understand for themselves before they kind of start to draw their own conclusions of whether their freedoms are being infringed upon with how this information is interacting with their daily lives.
Yeah, I completely agree. I think it also raises a question of the implications. Again, personally speaking, I think if someone lies about something like intrinsic to the presidential race that could potentially sway the votes of millions, I think that should be moderated a lot more severely than someone just lying about, I don't know, the characters on a TV show that has very little relevance to like governance or politics in general. And I think we need, especially social media companies, have a distinct obligation to not just moderate the content on their site, but really do it in a, I don't know, comprehensive manner that doesn't allow this kind of like fake news, like Cambridge Analytica stuff that has the potential of undermining like fundamentally our democracy.
Yeah, and this just reminded me of another thing that I've heard, but in European countries, I believe France was an example that I heard. Media blackouts are actually common, I believe 24 hours before the actual final election day. And that is kind of to not allow any sort of last minute information that might not be 100% verifiable to influence the public's opinion, or because, you know, it could be disinformation. So I think that going forward, if other developed countries have developed measures that limit the spread of disinformation, it might be helpful if, at least on some scale, we consider methods like that to kind of prevent loose information that really hasn't gone through the proper the proper checkpoints to be verified as a good source, to get out there to everybody who might not understand its validity.
Well, we just have a couple of minutes left. There's one other question I just want to throw out your way here. You know, this election seems to have become one where words like historic and, you know, kind of very important, more important than most presidential elections seem to be part of the discussion here. I guess I was wondering, when you talk to your friends at high school, is this a topic of conversation for a lot of you, or is it just a case where, you know, some of the high points maybe are heard and names may be familiar, but, you know, it's not a major topic of conversation, or is it? What's the sense of engagement, I guess, is where I'm going with this.
Yeah, it's definitely something a lot of people are talking about for sure. I feel like one of the things that is like talked about really often within the past few days is the fact that we see cities boarding up their windows, and these stores, these companies are protecting themselves from looting, from violence. People are too afraid, especially like people of color, people who identify as like in the LGBTQ plus community. These people are staying in their homes. They're too afraid to leave because of the outcome of the election. Either way it can go, we don't know what's going to happen. We haven't seen a country so divided in our entire time as a country, right? So it's definitely frightening, and it's so scary to see that some people are just so frightened to leave their homes, companies, businesses. They're frightened of being looted, and it's definitely something for the history books, that's for sure. But I'm positive that nothing will be too bad, but it's definitely something, there will be repercussions for sure.
Yeah, I definitely agree.
Sorry. Go ahead, Benjamin.
I was just going to say, I think a lot of, including myself and my peers, a lot of people our age are super engaged politically. I think just seeing the massive effects different political stuff has had on our lives is just crazy. And I think generally a lot of people our age are super engaged in like certain political sentiments, whether it be like addressing climate change or gun violence or issues of racial justice. And I think people in my peer group are not just engaged in like trying to change the status quo, but doing it in a particular manner that is not just comprehensive, but is like extremely inclusive. And I think even though Joe Biden wasn't my first choice, and I think the same can be said for a lot of people my age, generally there's a widespread consensus among Gen Z that even though he may not be the best, he's definitely better than the alternative.
Well, okay, we're going to have to leave it there for now. I just want to say thanks again to all 7 of you for sharing your thoughts with us tonight. Really fascinating to hear what you guys have to say, and hang in there with it. It's a long push, and everything doesn't happen as quickly as we all would like. But anyway, again, thank you very much, Noah Diedrich, Erin Norton, Ellis Glaizer, Ellery Stahler, Benjamin Park, Austin Carr, and Noel Schlageter. Thank you all for being with us tonight and sharing your opinions with us. I think I want to have you back on another show again real soon so we can continue this conversation into some other areas as well. Anyway, we're going to go to another short break. Going to come back in a couple of minutes. We have Representative Cynthia Browning and I believe Governor Jim Douglas in the waiting room or the green room virtually. So don't go anywhere. We'll see you in a few minutes.
What is it we mean when we say free speech?
Those in favor of Article 9 say aye.
Because 20% over just a few years is obviously not sustainable.
It's not just bringing in a like district there.
And I have no comment on the petition.
I think in the board's opinion, it's land that's not going to be developed.
We are going to discuss some very contentious topics.
That's the standard we all want in a small town.
If this is passed, does the taxpayers kind of lose their say?
What is it we mean when we say free speech? Free speech, free speech, free speech.
Hey folks, Haas from Gnat-tv. And if you're a fan of your select board meetings or your school board meetings, but let's face it, life is way too short to sit through the boring parts, then we've got something for you. It's called an agenda guide. It allows you to watch what you want to watch when you want to watch it. Here's how it works. Go to gnat-tv.org, go to Watch, go to Government Meetings, find your town and select the meeting you'd like to watch. Off to the right are the agenda items. Scroll and click on what you'd like to watch. Easy and fast.
right, and we're back. Glad you're still here all with us. That was certainly a fascinating conversation by our student panel there. As I think I said last year, or I should say 2 years ago, the last time we had an election cycle here, now the challenge is on all of us to up our game here. Otherwise, we're going to be out of jobs next time an election rolls around. Those kids certainly were very impressive. And John O'Keefe is with us. Great to have you with us, John. Thank you for bearing with us there and joining our panel. Good to see you here.
Thanks for having me, Andrew.
So we have a couple of minutes before we're going to bring on our next special guest, Representative Cynthia Browning. I guess, do we have any new numbers to report or any new election results out there that we can pass along to folks beyond what we already have done? Didn't know.
Sorry, Andrew. So while I was off in the ether of the internet, I was able to crunch a couple numbers here, and I have some results from the town clerk in Manchester and then Sunderland. So I can give you some numbers on Bennington 4 if you're interested.
All right.
I think that somebody else had previously given the numbers for Sunderland. So when you add in Manchester's numbers were 1730 for James, 1702 for Bongartz, and 921 for Cynthia Browning. So that brings the vote total right now to 1963 for James and 1909 for Bongartz. So less than 50 votes separating those two. And then less than 1,200 votes for Browning right now at 1,178. So that leaves Arlington left to report in, and of course Sandgate as well. I do have the numbers from last election cycle, actually, where Browning, James, and Brian Keefe ran. Now, this is what is a little confusing to me. Town of Arlington is saying on their Facebook page that they had 1,502 people voting today. It seems low. 2 years ago, it was 2,180. So I think we've got to get some more clarity on that as far as the numbers from Arlington. And then Sandgate last time had 388 votes. So last time in Arlington, between Browning, James, and Brian Keefe, Cynthia Browning had 670 votes, James had 577, and Brian Keefe had 470. So that's sort of where that stands. The interesting thing on the state level with the governor's race is the only town so far reporting in that David Zuckerman has won is Brattleboro. This probably is really bad news for David Zuckerman because he only won Brattleboro by 1 vote.
Uh-oh.
So that's
I would imagine he would have had to carry it by a little bit more than that.
Yeah, it was 2,067 votes to 2,066 votes. So that is probably going to be the start of a bad night for David Zuckerman, I think.
Well, and I guess we can assume that Governor Scott's management of the COVID pandemic is holding him in good stead and certainly driving his re-election prospects as well. But Cherise, I wanted to bring you into this here and talk a little bit about the lieutenant governor's race, since Molly Gray does have a connection to the local area, as you pointed out at the start of the show. Are you thinking that Molly Gray, this newcomer, young lady, 36 years old, who's making her first bid for public office, as far as I can tell, that's pretty impressive to come basically out of nowhere and be in what seems to be a very competitive race with Scott Milne, who has run 2 statewide races before.
Yeah, it does seem to be a pretty meteoric rise. And I will say here in the mountain towns, there are a lot of signs up for Molly Gray this election season. She is a 2002 graduate of Stratton Mountain School of their Nordic program. So she does have a lot of familiarity in the area through that program, but it remains to be seen how the numbers turn out. The only town up here reporting as of right now is Weston, and Gray did win that town about twice over Milne. Other results from that town have, Biden coming in the lead, as well as Scott by about a 3-to-1 margin. and we'll see how the rest of the numbers play out. I think in Landgrove, one really interesting metric to keep an eye on will be voter turnout. They had the highest voter turnout during the primaries this summer, and it looks like they're at about 94% for the general election voter turnout, which could be the highest in the state.
And I suppose it's going to come as no surprise to anybody, but we learned shortly after we went on the air that AP has given Vermont to Joe Biden. And it's 3 electoral votes, so probably won't in the end be decisive, but I guess we never know. Anyway, I guess at this point, why don't we see if Representative Browning is available there in the waiting room and ready to be brought on stage here to hear from her on this race. Representative Browning, are you there? I thought I had her on the screen there a moment ago. Well,
Andrew, while you try to get Cynthia on, do you want me to tell you about the lieutenant governor's race?
Yeah,
based
absolutely.
on the map.
Sure.
Kind of following up on what Cherise was saying, there's a lot of towns that Phil Scott turned red, including cities like Winooski, that Phil Scott won, but the map is not trending for Scott Milne. Right now it's 49%, almost 50% to just a little bit under 43% right now for Milne. I think that the interesting thing is, I think with a state with a lot of Democratic-leaning voters who are obviously voting for Phil Scott, I do wonder if when they move down one spot on the ticket, whether they're voting for Molly Gray, sort of almost as penance for voting for a Republican at the top of the ticket. But it does look like Molly Gray is winning a lot of towns that Phil Scott, for example, Barrytown, Milne has won Republican Rutland City, and so has Phil Scott. But there's a lot of communities that Phil Scott has won that Scott Milne has not won.
Interesting. Oh well, I see Representative Browning there is in the waiting room. Representative Browning, hello, good evening. Glad to have you joining us.
Hi.
This Zoom technique here is certainly one that's filled with interesting adventures. But I just wanted to ask you the same question. Basically, I asked Kathleen James and Seth Bongartz earlier. What was it like campaigning this year with the pandemic and kind of some of the restrictions that you were probably facing with kind of going out and meeting voters in person? It must have been a very different experience.
Well, it was, but it wasn't just not being able to go door to door or having forums in person. For me, it was also having the legislature go so long. Remember, the legislative session went till September 26th, I think, or 26th. And, usually it's over May 14th. And so the whole summer, when usually we'd be telling people about what happened and what it meant, we didn't even know where we were. So to me, it was really hard to start campaigning when I didn't know what we had done. And I don't know if that makes sense, but that's the way it felt to me. So it was a combination of the not being able to go meet people. I couldn't have my office hours. We couldn't have forums. And then having the legislature go so long, because the legislature takes a lot of energy in order to do it right. And so that was very difficult, I thought.
And what were some of the issues that you heard from voters about? I mean, to the extent that you were able to have conversations with them and get feedback, I mean, what were some of the things that were on their minds uppermost?
I think that most people were just heartbroken by what has happened in terms of the number of people who've been ill and who've been suffering and that we've lost. And then also really heartbroken about our economy, because so many people are struggling. So many businesses are in danger of maybe never reopening or going under. It's just really overwhelming. And I think that everybody that I talked to wanted to know, how can we be sure we help people? How can we be sure that businesses get the support they need going forward, that families need, that children get what they need in the schools? I think that was dominant for me. And then there were also people who really worried about the Global Warming Solutions Act, or they worried about, paid family leave. There were other issues in there too. But I think just as it is nationally, the pandemic and the economy were right up there.
All right, Jeff, Cherise, John, do you have any questions for Representative Browning before we let her go?
Cynthia, what sort of numbers? This is John O'Keefe. What sort of numbers did you see at the polls this year? Did you go to Arlington and Manchester and Sunderland? Do you think turnout was higher, or was it lower in mail-ins?
Oh, I think it was overwhelmingly mail-ins. The turnout was much, much lighter. It almost seemed like the turnout you get on a primary or something, but it was the general election. I thought the turnout was a lot lighter. There still was a steady stream. I spent several hours in Manchester. I spent several hours in Arlington. I stopped in at Sunderland and Sandgate, but I thought many, many people voted ahead of time, if not by mail, by dropping it off. And I think many people liked the dropping off because then they didn't have to worry about the mail.
Mm-hmm.
But I think we might end up with record turnout. I mean, the last I heard about Arlington, which was like at 5:30, they already had 1,400 votes. And I think that's pretty high for Arlington. So I think it'll be wonderful if we have a record turnout. I think that would be fantastic.
I can pass along to you that the town clerk in Manchester said that basically before she even opened the doors for business this morning, she had more votes, or almost as many votes this year as she did 4 years ago.
Yeah, I'm not surprised. I am not surprised at all. And so really, she's probably heading for a record, which is fantastic because everybody needs to vote and everybody's vote should be counted. And I'm very grateful to everybody who voted, whether they voted for me or not. And I'm so proud of Vermont.
Yeah, well, I can definitely echo what John was saying. Stopped off at the Sunderland and Arlington town halls, the American Legion Hall in Arlington, and voting was certainly on the heavy side, no question. Okay, well, Representative Browning, thank you.
Sure.
Thank you for being with us. I think we've got Governor Douglas sort of on the line here, or sort of in the waiting room, maybe sort of not. But once again, thank you for making the time to be with us, and good luck the rest of the way.
Thank you. Then I'll be signing off. Bye-bye.
All righty. I see Governor Douglas is there in the waiting room. All right. Okay. Well, moving right along here. Fast-paced evening we have. Governor Douglas, great to have you with us tonight to share your thoughts on this. Well, the word historic is being used a lot, so I'll use it again. Anyway, we have one of your old friends in the legislature, Jeff Wilson, here. To share your veteran wisdom with on these election nights. So I guess I'll just try to get us started here and just ask you what is your sense of how the races are going so far on the statewide level, the governor and lieutenant governor races? Are they sort of playing out according to what you were expecting, or we have some surprises?
Well, I'm not sure I've seen the latest numbers, Andrew, but there's no question that Governor Scott has enjoyed a tremendous amount of support across the political spectrum, largely for his successful handling of the COVID crisis, having been lauded by Dr. Fauci and recognized for the state with the lowest rate of cases and deaths, but also for his leadership in a broader sense. Even though the legislature has overridden him on a couple of things, Vermonters appreciate his calm demeanor, his measured approach to leading our state, and they're inclined to stick with him. Of course, most governors are reelected until and unless they decide to move on. That's not a given, but It's been the norm in our recent past. In the lieutenant governor's race, this is a blue state, and all else being equal, the default vote in Vermont is Democratic. There's less focus on that race, particularly this year because of the pandemic, where campaigning has been unorthodox, to put it mildly. And I run into a lot of voters here in the Middlebury area who say, well, I voted straight blue except for the governor because I like the job he's doing. So we'll see what happens when all the votes are counted. You used the adjective historic, I suppose, since we've only had, 4 or 5 dozen presidential elections in our history. Everyone is historic. But it looks like the turnout is quite substantial across the country. That's good to see, because democracy works best when the maximum number of voters participate in it.
Do you think that will continue with the expanded mail-in voting 2 years from now, or is that going to be like a permanent change, do you think, that's just going to stick, or are we going to go back to business as usual?
Well, you may be surprised at my response. I hope we go back to business as usual. I think mail-in voting well in advance has some real downsides, and let me mention a couple of them. There was an online story recently about a fellow who voted for Mayor Pete in our presidential primary last March, but by the time town meeting day came around, the mayor had dropped out. And this fellow was asking, well, can I retrieve my ballot and vote for somebody who's still running? Nope, sorry. If you're going to vote that far in advance, you better not have any regrets. And obviously campaigns continue, more information becomes available, and I think the more simultaneous the decision by the voters, the more the better it is. Secondly, we had, according to the Secretary of State, about 3% of the ballots in our August primary spoiled. Now, the primary is different from the general because of the 3 parties and all the paperwork you have to deal with in voting absentee there. But I heard him estimate that 1% of the ballots are going to be spoiled today. That's a lot of people. That's several thousand Vermonters. So I may be old-fashioned, Andrew, but I really believe that the best way to ensure that your vote is counted is to go to the polling place, to present yourself to an election official, get a ballot, mark it, put it in the box yourself, and then you know that that it's going to be counted. Not to mention the fact that sending out all these ballots is expensive and subject to a lot of error. We had 2 absentee ballots delivered to our political science department at Middlebury College. That's just one department in one college in a small state. A lot of ballots can go astray, both outbound and inbound back to the clerk. So I realize some people have to vote absentee for reasons of health or unavailability, but I kind of like the old-fashioned way.
Interesting. So just one last question real quick before we let you go. What do you think is going to be the big issue that the legislature will be confronting when they reconvene in January, either remotely or in person, as we all hope they will be able to? Is it going to be simply restoring the economy to what it was pre-pandemic, or will there be another question you think uppermost on the minds of, we assume Governor Scott sounds like he's in fairly good shape tonight, we'll be tackling?
Well, I think that's key. Perhaps just as we deem elections historic, I always say that the economy is the most important topic, but I think it is. We need to be sure that Vermonters can afford to live here, have decent jobs. We need to attract more people to come, as Governor Scott has said. I was often asked during my time in office what the greatest problem facing the state was, and I'll give the same answer tonight. It's demographics. We're stagnant in terms of the size of our population. We're aging, and our workforce is shrinking, and that has got to be job one. It's exacerbated by the pandemic, obviously, but those kinds of economic stressors are going to continue going forward. And just one other quick note, some people think, well, we're going to be flooded by folks moving here from Midtown Manhattan to get away from congested areas. And there have, of course, been a lot of home purchases in the recent past, some enrollment increases in schools. But I was talking with a local school superintendent just the other day, and he said, I wouldn't get too enthusiastic about that. Some will stay, but he said, I wouldn't be surprised if it's a one-year enrollment for a lot of these kids.
Interesting. That's been one question that's come up a fair amount down here as well. Is this just a one-year blip, or is it the start of a longer-term trend? I guess we'll find out.
We will.
Anyway, Governor, thank you so much for making some time out of what I know is a very busy evening to share some of your thoughts with us. Really appreciate your time, and we'll see you up in Middlebury one of these days.
Well, I hope so, Andrew. Thanks for inviting me. Nice to see Jeff and John on the screen there. Yeah, I'm glad that you called Jeff old and you called me merely a veteran. So
right.
There you go. He got it right.
I hope I got it right. There's a lot of pressure, you know?
Governor, did you know that Andrew is a Yankee fan?
I didn't know that. I could have. I could have issued a pardon while I was in office, but I wasn't aware of that.
Oh, he's never going to be on my program again.
Exactly.
I can see where this is going. Yeah. All right. Thanks, Jeff. Anyway, Governor, thanks again for your time. Really appreciate you sharing your thoughts with us.
My pleasure.
Take care.
Yes, sir.
We've got another break coming up in a few minutes, but we have a few minutes before, well, actually, excuse me, our next guest will be Representative Linda Joy Sullivan in a few minutes. I guess any new numbers to report, panel?
Yeah, I got some numbers. I sent them to John. I don't know if you checked your email, John, so you could put them together. But we got Arlington.
I did, Jeff. I was able to multitask, which I'm told I'm not good at. But I was able to multitask and listen to you slandering Andrew as a Yankee fan and add up numbers at the same time.
You had a better year than you did.
Well, everybody did.
It looks like when you add the numbers together, I want to double check them at the break, but it looks like Kathleen James has just under 2,700 votes, 2,693. Seth Bongartz has 2,554, and Cynthia Browning has 1,971. I'll do the numbers on Sandgate, but it looks like it's an impossible battle for Browning at this point, with the number of votes left in Sandgate to come back from about 600 votes. I don't think there's 600.
Yeah. I don't think we have 600 votes.
Residents in Sandgate, let alone votes.
Yeah, right.
So I'll do those numbers, but it looks like James and Bongartz are going to carry the day tonight.
And do we have any numbers on the state Senate race, the other race we're kind of watching closely? Anything from down the county there in Bennington and Shaftesbury, that neck of the woods, or?
Shaftesbury is reporting in, and they right now we're seeing basically Hall and Meg Hansen, literally neck and neck. Both of them have about 893 votes for Hall and 885 for Hansen, and Dick Sears and Campion have about 1463 for Sears and 1444 for Campion, and Hoyt is trailing by quite a bit. But those numbers include right now. They're not giving me a lot. Bennington. So it's not including a lot of the numbers up from here. Bennington 3, which I think is Shaftesbury. So they have some Sunderland numbers, some Shaftesbury numbers, and Searsburg numbers. So most of those votes that are being tallied up are from Shaftesbury. About 4,400 of those votes are from Shaftesbury. So it looks like not a lot of results yet. We do have some Manchester numbers. I think we went over those earlier.
You should have the Arlington numbers too.
Let's see here, the Manchester numbers, and then I gotta tilt my head to look at Jeff's numbers, so I have to go like this. But it looks like Campion and Sears right now about the same numbers, almost 1,400 votes for each one. In Manchester, and about a little bit over 800 votes for Hansen and Hall in Manchester. And then the Arlington ones, Jeff, Hall has 541 votes, Campion 652, Meg Hansen at 407, and Sears at 745. So much tighter in Arlington, I think, for Mike Hall especially. Jeff, probably you would expect that.
Yeah, Mike lives in Sunderland, so yeah, I think once you see Bennington come in, there will be a much bigger lead for Campion and Sears. Here's a question, though. I mean, if you look at the Secretary of State's office, some clerks are responding to the Secretary of State's office on these races, and some aren't, apparently.
Yes, yep.
So I don't get that.
Actually, the Sunderland numbers, I do have those here under the details. Sunderland, Mike Hall, much closer. Still a little bit, for example, in Bennington, 4 in Sunderland, 231 votes for Dick Sears, 207 for Campion, and 200 for Mike Hall.
Yeah.
So Mike Hall is running much closer in Sunderland. Same thing in Bennington, 3, just a couple votes that separate Campion, Sears, and Hall.
Right.
But I think traditionally Campion and Sears have run really strong in Bennington, obviously.
Yeah, I mean, they'll be strong in South County.
Yep.
Big time, yeah.
So I'm just seeing that VT Digger has called the election for Scott. No big surprise there. Cherise, before we head to our next guest and Representative Sullivan, are there any competitive races going on up in the mountain towns or in Chester and Andover in that area where you guys cover? Is there any, it sounded like it was kind of quiet situation, but am I missing something?
Yeah, so closest to the Manchester-Bennington region, it is pretty quiet. The 2 races closest to us are unopposed right now. We've got Linda Joy Sullivan as well as Kelly Paola, both running unopposed. Up further north in the Windsor 3-1 district, we have Tom Bach running for re-election. He does have a pretty strong following here in this area. He's really active in local politics and served on the Chester Select Board for quite some time. He's opposed by Chester Alden, a Republican, who as of last night had posted, no matter how things go, I'll be running again and coming back to local politics. So even if he does not pull forward today, there's no results yet from that region, then I expect that's a name that we'll see again come up. Up in the Windsor 2 district, Anne-Marie Christensen is not coming back for another term, and there are no results there yet. But we've got John Arison, a Democrat, Mike Kell, a Republican, and Sean Whalen, an independent. So we'll see how those numbers play out as the night goes on.
All right. Well, I see Representative Sullivan waiting patiently there in the in the virtual green room or whatever we want to call it. So why don't we bring her on in and have her join the conversation and hear what she has to tell us.
Yeah, can I just break in for once? I do have the results from Dorset, so it does sound like you're probably speaking to the winner. Linda Joy Sullivan got 1,177 votes. In Dorset. I don't see any other huge results. We can go over those afterwards, but the town of Dorset is posting their results on their Facebook page, and no big shock. I think the only one is Molly Gray at 731 votes and Scott Milne at 562 votes.
And that's in Dorset?
In Dorset, yeah.
Okay. All right. Well, on that note then, Representative Sullivan, welcome to the show. This is where political junkies come to live and breathe here for this evening. Anyway, first of all, thank you for making the time to be with us this evening. I'm sure there's lots that you're following at every level here, but I guess I just thought I'd ask you, as you had I believe no competition, right? There was no candidate you were running against. I always find out later when I say things like that oh yeah, there was somebody who was like on the ballot or whatever. But I guess what is your sense of what the voters are most concerned about in your district? There includes Dorset, Danby, Landgrove, Peru, and Mount Tabor, if memory serves correctly. As you met up with them as best you could under the situation obtaining under the pandemic, what were you hearing from them?
So I think, first of all, really thank you for doing this. I think it's so important that everybody gets to hear what's going on, and you are all doing a great job. What I have heard from my district is that most people are interested in safety right now because of the COVID issues, safety and inequality with economic development, and that's very important for them. So whatever goes on right now, the COVID-19 issues are a high priority.
So I guess that suggests that when the legislature reconvenes in January, economic issues will be at the forefront.
I would hope so. I would think that most people need to get back on their feet without the fear that it's going to turn Vermont into shopping centers, which it will never do. So I think that it's very important that we look at how to get people jobs, how to get them the best benefits, and how to keep everybody stable, because everybody is very much afraid of a surge again, especially coming into the winter months.
Any questions from any of the other panelists here, or shall I?
Yeah, the only thing I was wondering about, Linda, was relative to the lieutenant governor's race. Mm-hmm. And I think it was Senator Ingram and yourself, more or less, if you want to say, broke party ranks and endorsed Scott Millen. I just wondered what your rationale was for that and why you thought Millen would be a better candidate to support than Molly Gray.
Sure. So first, I don't believe we broke party ranks, but I think we voted for who we thought was the most ethical candidate. I had issues with some of the documentation that I saw from Molly Gray, and I had issues with some of the attorney ethical issues when somebody makes a representation and I couldn't get answers. Mm-hmm. And for me, as a licensed professional, if I can't get answers on that, I have concerns. And so I needed to step back, and that was for me. I also thought, because of economic development, a business person right now would be more sensible. So I actually can tell you that from the very beginning, I was following Molly Gray and, following and listening to all of her Zooms. And then when those questions came up, which I asked, and then looked at my own documentation that I looked at, and they were contradictory, I just had to step back.
Gotcha. Thanks a lot. I was just curious since we had you.
Just ask,
Yeah. Representative, I have a quick question. Moving up the ticket, not a great night for David Zuckerman. He almost lost Brattleboro. He won Brattleboro by a vote. Any thoughts on the governor's race? It does seem like it's going to be a tsunami for Republican Phil Scott in very blue Vermont. Any thoughts on that?
Yes, I do. As I said, I believe that people are highly concerned about the pandemic, and people believe that our current governor has done a great job in trying to save people's lives and keep them, safe and move them forward and stop them from being afraid. And I think fear plays a big part. And, to change when you have such a pandemic out there is scary. And so I believe that played a big part in keeping our governor right now in play, because this is a time where you can say, okay, I'll change at a lower level, but to have the entire state change, it's a little bit too scary for people.
Mm-hmm. Thanks.
Well, all right, Representative Sullivan, thank you so much for taking the time out of the evening to be with us and share your thinking with us. I really appreciate that. And we'll let you get back to the victory party or whatever might be going on. And we'll be in touch and all that. Look forward to, meeting up again in a couple of months, if not sooner, and hearing about what may be in store legislatively as we get to 2021.
Thank you for doing this.
All right, thank you.
Bye.
All right. Well, we're going to take another short break here for a minute or two, and then be right back with Bob Stannard and hear from him, as well as sort of having our panel here wrap things up and engage in some heavy-duty analysis or whatever it is we're going to wind up doing. Okay. Don't go anywhere. We'll be right back. Transparent access to local government, civic information, from the Select Board to the State House. Find it at Gnat-tv.
And or much more difficult
on canvas
to thrive
is
free. Not only do I want
the actual IRS.
We're all news that we're going to come in around
Failing
of support.
So it's not going to happen.
Previous attorney.
Because I'll tell
Nobody
you.
played tennis about a tally stick.
Miraculously.
Now, if I look back at the library, but
The actual paper.
we take pride in the
Have in our current state
the
of
majority.
It's not illegal, but opioids from their
Television show I bended the law.
Incentivized almost.
no one's
lecture.
colleges correctly.
An immersive living experience.
All right, and we're back, and glad to have you all still with us here as we get through the evening here. Probably going to pivot a little bit to some national numbers and maybe in the not too distant future. But first of all, let's bring on Mr. Stannard here. Bob has been waiting patiently in the waiting room there for a while now. And Bob, great to have you with us. Thanks for joining Election Night Live.
Thanks for having me on, Andrew. And I'm not so sure I've been waiting patiently. It is, after all, an election night. Patience, I guess is what we all need to be focused on. Yeah, it's quite a night so far. As I'm watching my television, Joe Biden just won Delaware and Donald Trump just won Arkansas. There's some big news for you. You know what this is we're all sitting in the stadium and you hear the bugle go off and the bells go off and the gates open up and out go the horses, and you look and your horse is in the very back and you're a little discouraged, and they come into the second turn and your horse has made like one overture forward and you're having some sign of hope, but not much. They come around the back stretch into the third corner and your horse is making a little headway, but not that much. And so we're kind of right about there. And now what? Where's my horse going to end up? This is going to be close. I always thought it was going to be close. I mean, we've been listening to the polls saying that, there's going to be a big blue wave or there's going to be a big red wave. It's more like a stream that we saw in Vermont in early September with no rain.
A purple
yeah.
brook, huh?
Yeah, purple brook. Yeah, maybe.
Well, I just saw one announcement float by that looks like John Hickenlooper in Colorado has defeated Cory Gardner.
Well, there's one. There's one. The Democrats need two more, and Susan Collins is up in Maine. I thought she'd be pulling wings off flies. I mean, I thought she'd be easy to beat. Apparently not. So who knows? It's going to be a long night. I think after this interview, I will probably wait until morning to see how it panned out. Although, knowing me, having been through numerous elections, I might want to stay up. I do want to put a shout out to the people that have run. I have done this plenty of times. I think I've run for office 7 times, and I've won, more than half of them. I won't say how many I lost. They're always more fun to win. It's very stressful. It's a very hard thing to put yourself out before the public and subject yourself to running for office. So my congratulations to everybody who put their name on a ballot. it's a big deal. I couldn't help but notice earlier in the evening when we were getting ready for this that there was a lot of kids on the panel tonight. It really was one of the most heartwarming things I think I've seen in many years, that there's kids in this community that care about this stuff. It's important. They may not think it is, because when you're that age, there's a whole lot of other things in life that appear to be more important. But this is very important business. And to see young people on this channel on this evening paying attention and seemingly caring about this was just very heartwarming. It was very exciting to see. That's the future of this country. They got to get involved, you know, they do.
Yeah, get involved.
I'm done. You're done. You know, we're all done. We're all old. You know, we're done.
Hey, boy, harsh. I thought I had get to go, but
keeping it real here. Keeping it real.
Yeah, well, I mean, what is your sense of where things are going to go, Bob? You know, I guess we can look at this sort of, blow it up a little bit of the national picture now. I mean, so much of what we've heard this year has been about political division, polarization. You know, how Republicans and Democrats don't look at each other necessarily as just sort of people who see things differently, but are, you know, evil, or you know, like people who aren't paying attention. I mean, the level of, I don't know, just emotion, to just come up with one word, seems much more intense this time around.
You know, I think about this a lot, Andrew. I mean, I really do. I wonder, how do we get back to a time when you and I were in our 20s? And how do we get back to, well, in our 20s, we were fighting the Vietnam War. So that wasn't necessarily a non-polarized environment. But this is different. I mean, you know, I just watched the Chicago 7 trial on Netflix the other night, which, by the way, all your viewers should watch that show. It was an amazing movie. But we were polarized back then, but it was a different sort of polarization. We were all fighting what we thought to be an illegal war. Today, we seem to be fighting ourselves. And whatever happens tonight, you know, whether Biden wins or whether Trump wins, the question is, how do we grab onto these people that are so disenfranchised and are so easily swayed by lies and innuendos and false information? How do we get by that? I wish I could share with the viewers tonight my words of wisdom as a solution to that, and I don't have it. I do think that if we don't change presidents this evening, that there's not going to be a lot of hope for our shredded democracy. But there's question whether there's going to be hope for it at all. I mean, we're in a tough spot as a nation. We really are, which is why I was delighted to see kids actually starting to care about this stuff, because if they don't, there are people out there who are just really happy to disenfranchise them, as well as they have disenfranchised blacks and disenfranchised other major voting blocs in this country. And that's the problem. I mean, the Democrats and Republicans have always found a way to come together on certain issues. But now when you see one party working extremely hard to keep people from voting, and one party working extremely hard to ensure that people vote, that's a really wide gap. That's a really wide gap. I mean, we're not fighting over issues anymore. We're fighting about oppression. And at some point, I think that the oppressed are going to get really angry and rise up. And I don't know what that means exactly, but I mean, I lived through a near revolution as a kid with the Vietnam War. I don't know. I don't know what happens, but it's a scary time. You know, all times are scary, but and all elections are important. But this particular election, I think, has much more gravity to it than any one that I've ever been involved in personally or been involved in peripherally. This is a tough time.
I was thinking about something you said earlier, you know, when you were saying, you know, how important it is for folks to step up and run for public office. My sense of it is that it's much harder to do that now than it was 10, 15, 20 years ago. I mean, the social media element of it is brought a whole different dimension to the whole exercise. And I find myself wondering, what that effect will have on people who might otherwise have been inclined to throw their hats in the ring and give it a try versus, gee, do I want to like kind of get involved in all of that? I guess I just wonder how that's going to.
Boy, I can appreciate what you've just said. I mean, I look back and my campaigns, I think my first campaign, I raised like $200. I think my most expensive campaign was like $800, maybe. I just knocked on doors and I tried to be everywhere. By the way, the dump was a great place to hang out. And you may recall, you might have been a reporter back then when I got evicted from the dump. And I held my press conference and said, I'd been thrown out of better dumps than this.
I'm sorry.
That's what I did. I mean, I ran for office and I didn't raise a lot of money. I had people just give me checks. I don't even know if I sent out a fundraising letter. Today I'm hearing that house seats are $15,000, $20,000, $25,000. And so you've got to start way in advance and you've got to go grovel and beg for money. And that's a big task for somebody who's not used to doing it and saying, wow, do I want to jump into this? But having said all that, if you're in Vermont, don't get discouraged, get involved and find a way. Yeah, it's expensive, but if you're on the right side and you're on the right side of the issues and you're popular, you'll find the support you need. And I mean, I encourage everybody, I don't care what party you are, put your name on a ballot. It's quite an experience. Sometimes it's a good one, sometimes it's not. And I've been on both sides of that.
More fun to win, I'm sure, than lose. But
it's more fun to win than it is to lose, believe me. But that said, there is something to be said for standing out in the crowd and just putting your name on a ballot. It's a brave thing to do, and I encourage everybody to do it. I mean, maybe it's not for everybody. I mean, here's the case in point. How about my friend David Zuckerman, who has just got clocked by Phil Scott tonight? And I think that anybody who follows Vermont politics knew that was going to happen. I think David knew it was going to happen. And David was lieutenant governor. He had the cushiest job in Vermont. Got paid pretty well. He had to bang a gavel down and run the Senate, yawn. It's not a big deal, to be lieutenant governor, to be honest with you. It's important early on, but after that, okay. Cushy job. He would have, if he had run for lieutenant governor this time, he would have won with 90% of the vote. Instead, he walked away from that and challenged the king because he was absolutely diametrically opposed to Phil Scott on issues of importance to the state of Vermont. You know how much courage that takes to do that? I mean, I don't know if his wife weighed in on it, but she probably wanted him to keep the gig. I don't know. But, and I
Andrew,
just
can I jump in here for a second? Just ask a question?
If you feel you have to, yeah.
Yeah, I know, but I couldn't. I would feel bad not asking you a tough question. So you supported David. I'm looking at the election results. The map is all red for Phil Scott. The only outlier is Brattleboro. He won Brattleboro by 1 vote, David Zuckerman. That's not good news. Molly Gray looks like she really clobbered Milne in Brattleboro. How do you was Phil Scott too moderate and David Zuckerman too liberal for mainstream Vermont, or was it the COVID thing? What explains that? And obviously, people in Brattleboro, almost half of them voted for Phil Scott, and then when they went down the ticket, almost all of them voted for Molly Gray.
Amazing. Well, I haven't followed that, but I can speak to it. Phil Scott did a good job of handling the virus, and he did a good job of voting against his party's leader. That's terrific. But if you think about it, his job as governor is to do a good job when there's a pandemic. And look at Peter Shumlin when we had Tropical Storm Irene. What did he do? Peter Shumlin did, the first thing he did was, okay, all of our environmental regulations are going out the window, and we're going to rebuild our roads in 3 months. No Act 250, no 248. We're just rebuilding our roads. The left wing and the environmentalist people were all up in the air about it. They were all up in arms. And he said, too bad. This is a job. We're going to do it. We have to do it. We have no choice. That's the job of the governor. When you're hit with a crisis, your job is to deal with it and deal with it fast. And so he did that. And Phil Scott did the same thing. I mean, I guess he gets credit for it, but the way I look at it is you get credit for doing your job. Your job is to show up and run the town. You know, if you don't show up and run the town, you're not going to get a lot of credit for what you do. But if you show up and run the town, you're going to get credit for it. So I think that Phil got a lot of credit for it, but, you know, I'm not so sure it was all that well deserved because that's what he's supposed to do. Conversely, I do think that, you know, David has always been a progressive Democrat, although I think that would play in Brattleboro. That's probably why I won by 1 vote. But I know that David's always had kind of a tough relationship with the Democratic Party because he's been a progressive Democrat. And that makes it tough. That makes it tough for any candidate. You know, he's not just a Democrat. He's not just a progressive. He's being both. And that makes it tough. But that said, listen, Phil Scott's a very popular guy. He's a nice guy. He's a race car driver. You know, he hasn't done a whole lot of things wrong. The one big thing that was dropped in his lap was a virus, and he handled it well, like I would expect any governor to do. And so he won re-election, and, you know, it probably should have.
So any thoughts on Molly Gray if she's elected? It looks like she's probably on track to get elected. You kind of said that it's, you know, there's been varying approaches for the lieutenant governor. One is to sort of be the shadow government, and the other one is to sort of be part of the cabinet. Which one do you think is more effective if she was elected and she has a Republican governor?
Well, I did support Molly. She's very smart. She's an attorney. She already knows her way around. I have zero doubt that Molly Gray and Phil Scott will be able to work together. Now, Phil Scott, I don't know how much conversation you folks spent with David Zuckerman, but Phil Scott really shut David out. David tried on numerous occasions to reach out to Phil and work with him on certain things, and he was shut out. The Scott administration wanted nothing to do with him. Now, that may, you know, that unfortunate attitude may carry over to Molly Gray. Maybe not. We'll see. Time will tell. I mean, Phil's a nice guy, but some of his staff wouldn't necessarily qualify as nice people. And I think that's where the rub comes in. But Molly's going to, you know, she's going to be a great lieutenant governor. She's smart. She's hip on issues. She's going to do just fine. Whether Phil Scott chooses to work with her or not, I think that's actually going to boil down to being his problem. I think Molly's going to do just fine. And she's, you know, she's looking to me as though she's the future of this state.
Do you now we keep calling all of ourselves old with
you
the
are
exception
old.
of Cherise. I know I am old. I'm almost 50.
Yeah.
Does Molly Gray? I mean, I think she's under 40. Does she have a role in the government, you think, to try to turn this demographic around and try to attract more younger residents?
Well, she's about to be lieutenant governor. That's about as high a role as you can get, except for being governor. She is around, I don't know what her age is, but she is around 40 years old. And she is a woman, and I don't mean to be sexist about it, but the fact of the matter is, I think that Molly Gray is going to be the perfect candidate to attract young people, to inspire young women in this state. She has the opportunity. Now, I don't know that she'll be able to pull it off, but I think that she's smart enough and cognizant enough that she's going to be a real role model for the youth of this state. And frankly, I'm very excited about the role that she's about to assume.
Well, all right.
And I should put a shout out before you cut me off to our local representatives. I believe that Kathleen James and Seth Bongartz are going to be headed to Montpelier, and I believe that Brian Campion and Dick Sears are also going to be headed to Montpelier. And I think the voters basically called it as they saw it. And I think that's a good thing for Bennington County.
All right. Well, Bob, thank you for taking the time out of the evening. We'll let you get back to watching the television there. And
oh my God, I was almost asleep. Thank God I had a timer on my watch that vibrated me and woke me up.
all right. Well, so are we, because then we would have been wondering, where do you go?
Oh, what happened to Bob? Yeah, well, people have been asking that question for years. Listen,
Yeah,
thanks for having me on.
Right. Anyway, well, all right. Well, thanks again, and take care, and we'll see you around the roundabout or whatever.
No doubt. All right, man.
Okay, take care.
See you later.
Okay, well, panelists, back to us now. I guess I was just thinking, we haven't spent a whole lot of time looking at some of the national figures there. Bob was sort of hinting at a few trends. Do we know anything that's going on? I mean, I've been here in the local silo bubble here, and blissfully unaware of whatever may be going on outside of the fact that Biden carried Vermont and Delaware. Do we have any other any kind of any swing votes or swing states, I should say? Pennsylvania, Florida, North Carolina. I mean, the further western states probably.
Too early to
vote by now.
I think they're too early to call. I'm just sort of looking at CNN. Right now, the Electoral College map is 89 Biden, 72 Trump, but there's a boatload of states still in play, very close. So we'll see.
NPR lists it as a 131 Biden, 92 Trump.
Really? CNN's behind, way behind.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. At one point they had Texas kind of light blue. Now they have it light red, and they have Florida light red and Georgia light red. It looks like, yeah, so it's interesting. It depends who you ask, I guess. It does sound like it's going to be a long night.
Aside from the Senate race in Colorado, which I saw Hickenlooper defeating Cory Gardner, which is no surprise there. I mean, the control of the Senate is another big thing we're following tonight. The Democrats need to pick up a net of 3 seats, and it seems like they've kind of figured that poor Doug Jones in Alabama isn't going to return to Washington next year. So that means four seats would need to be flipped. And I guess Maine and Susan Collins was certainly on that short list there, and also out in Arizona, which of course way too early at this point to kind of get any results there in that race there with Mark Kelly and Martha McSally. But no other news yet.
There was a lot of talk about McConnell in Kentucky. I think that Democrats were more hopeful than they may have expected, but McConnell wins easily for re-election. So, we had gotten a lot of communications that, they had a good candidate and that they were really going to take a run at him. McGrath was the person that was running against him, but McConnell's going to go back. So,
John, what you have for, which is NPR had a?
Yeah, NPR has 131 Biden, 98 Trump.
Yeah,
but there's a lot of states that they haven't thrown up yet.
That's what News Hour had. Yeah, PBS has that too. Okay, maybe
they have the same numbers.
Yeah.
Sure. Texas has 38 electoral votes that right now they're showing that 50.6 to Trump and 48.1 to Biden. Georgia, I think the Democrats were hopeful there. It looks like it's not going very well at all. Trump at almost 56%. In Florida, I know that the early results were that Biden had not done as well in Miami-Dade County as Clinton had, and that was a really key demographic for Biden. On the other hand, they're showing North Carolina is leaning Biden. Ohio, Pennsylvania, all those states, Michigan, Wisconsin, all sort of question marks right now.
And many more to come. Of course, Pennsylvania being the big one, and then of course Wisconsin, Michigan, maybe to a lesser extent, Iowa and Montana were also kind of states that were kind of semi in play or not. I wanted to ask you though, what you all made of, the sort of the electioneering strategy that the two candidates seem to have. I mean, President Trump didn't seem to have a formal platform in the traditional sense. At least they seem to come out of the convention or the passed for a Republican convention with more of a talking point list. Whereas in 2016, he had this very strong populist message that seemed to resonate with a lot of folks. What you make of how they both went about their respective campaigns? Did it kind of make sense? Biden kind of had more of a, let's see, I mean, he was clearly very concerned about the whole social distancing and mask wearing and not having big, large rallies. And that clearly was what President Trump based his campaign around. Any thoughts on how they went about pursuing this election campaign that was either surprising or unexpected?
I don't know if I'd say it's unexpected, but I think this election cycle more than ever, we've definitely seen both candidates campaigning more on actions rather than words. And it's been very representative, I think, of the overall policy platform for both of them. As you said, Biden's been campaigning in a very cautious way with a lot of respect towards health guidelines and gathering sizes and the logistics overall of how his campaign is being run. Whereas the Trump campaign has been, very kind of flying in the face of the health regulations that have come out regarding the pandemic. So having those two logistic structures kind of battling one another seems to encapsulate what the policy platforms are saying just as well. I mean, Trump has made a lot of references recently to draining the swamp and questioning authority when it comes to the kind of institutionalized candidates and politicians that are in the system now. So I think it's pretty representative of the platform, even though it's not as you said, articulated as it has been in the past.
I think one of the things that's really interesting is the whole Fauci thing, is how Fauci has played in. He's a central figure in both campaigns. One says he's going to fire him, the other one says he's going to hire him. I don't think that, I think it's a completely different style between the two campaigns too, where I don't feel like the Trump campaign has any order to it. I think that, I suspect that his aides are the last ones to know when he stands up on stage and says something. I feel like Biden has a much more organized campaign, and when he's on stage, you can see that Biden, for example, and Obama are saying the same sort of things at parallel rallies at the same time. And I just feel like being the Trump campaign manager must be must be the worst job in America. I just can't imagine trying to manage the campaign and all the different, sometimes there's contradictions in the same rally.
Yeah, that would probably keep me awake at night, I can tell you that much. But I guess we'll see. Clearly, it's not going to be a race that's going to be over early, and of course, that leads to the whole question of what might happen if some of these swing states, Florida and Pennsylvania, I guess, are the two leading examples there. If it's really close, and then it comes down to the mail-in ballots that might not get counted even until later this week, where does that leave us? I mean, it wouldn't be the first time that would have happened, but given everything going on, boy, the potential for shall we say, an interesting rest of the week is certainly there. Sorry, Cherise, did you want to say something?
Oh, no, I was just going to say, I think it's interesting to see that there was not a lot of, violence or contention in Vermont or nationwide at any of the polls. That's definitely heartening to see after, I think, a day where a lot of people have held their breath.
Yeah, I mean, before we went on anyway, I was listening to a couple of the stations, and some of that concern about poll watchers or people who might be there and intimidating voters, that didn't seem to have happened. And And I guess interestingly also was the whole foreign meddling question, from Russia or other nation states didn't seem to have had the same effect as it apparently had in 2016. Is that what the rest of you guys read in that, or is that just one of those things we'll find out about in a couple of months?
I'm absolutely curious to see how the hospital hacking question comes into play, because I know that there has been a question of hospitals across the U.S. being interfered with and potentially by a foreign actor. I don't know if that's been essentially determined yet, but I know the UVM Medical Center was one of those places that was, a victim of the hacks. So I'm curious to see if, there's been a big delay in testing results, or if anybody, was prevented from voting, especially in the state of Vermont, because they were waiting on a delayed COVID test result when they had planned to go to the polls. But I don't see, much reporting of any evidence beyond that there's been any kind of interference.
Yeah, which is kind of surprising, because that certainly seemed to have been a big concern 3 or 4 or 5 months ago.
Andrew, what do you make of the? Oh, sorry, I was just looking at the map here, and they're starting to have some more results. But what's your take on the only state in the Northeast or New England that Trump seems to be really having some traction is Maine?
Not in New Hampshire?
No, right now, New Hampshire looks like it's trending Biden, actually by quite a bit, with about almost 30% of the votes counted. Maine's the one right now Trump's running 51% to about 45%. But it's literally everything from New Jersey and New York all the way up to down easter is blue, except for Maine.
Now, would that be a reflection of the two election districts in Maine? Would one be reporting earlier, or is that also you also have that ranked choice voting in Maine as well? I just wondered, that would really wouldn't impact the presidential race, though, would it?
No. Well, yeah, maybe it would. Right now, it does suggest that Maine is one of the two split states. It's Maine and Nebraska.
Right. I mean, Maine, one of the main congressional districts went for Trump last time. So
the northern one.
Yeah.
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 You might get
the part that's 95% of the state.
That's right. As far as geography goes.
Geography, yes, that's right. Yeah, geography. Yeah, that's interesting. It looks like New Hampshire's trending Biden, but that's always been a state that's really been a battleground state, and I think it's kind of shifted away from that in recent years. As more people move out of the base state, I think they're moving up to New Hampshire and maybe tipping the balance a little bit.
Yeah.
Yeah, could be.
You got a Republican governor, but you have two Democratic senators.
Mm-hmm.
One other race we haven't talked about yet is one that I kind of began following with a little more interest a couple of weeks ago, and that's the one in over in New York State between Elise Stefanik and Diedrich Cobb. Boy, a lot of advertising money got spent on that race. A lot of TV ads. And that will be an interesting one to see. I guess Stefanik is she's the incumbent and probably the favorite. She ran against Diedrich Cobb 2 years ago and defeated her. But she certainly came out very strongly for President Trump and sort of identified closely with him. Because that's a gigantic district. I mean, that goes all the way from Saratoga up to the Canadian border, right? And out towards, the middle of, John, your old neck of the woods up there.
It's my old neck of the woods. I believe it's one of the largest congressional districts east of the Mississippi. It was John McHugh was the congressman there for years. He actually was Obama's Secretary of the Army, left his seat, and that's how the seat opened up. But it's been a seat that I think up until recently, all the way back to Reconstruction, has been Republican. But it's a very difficult district to campaign in. You've got the Albany TV market, the Syracuse TV market, the Watertown TV market, and the Plattsburgh TV market. And it's basically that whole, what most people in New York would say is that frozen wasteland that sticks up into Canada there. But it's a tough district, and it's there are some cities in that district that do tend to vote Democrat. But I think in most cases it would be the Republican seat to lose. But Stefanik, Tender Cobb seems to have run a good race, and I think we've all been privy to their election ads over here in Manchester.
Yeah, it seemed like I couldn't turn on the TV without seeing one for a while there. And
I think it is interesting to watch.
Either.
Well, it's interesting to watch Vermont political ads. I think we're much politer. And then you watch the ones over in Albany, everyone's in slow motion and black and white. And there's quite a bit of mudslinging across the border.
Yeah.
Much more than Vermont. I don't think they really pull any punches over there. It's either the ad where you are trying to make yourself look good, or it's the ad that you're smearing your opponent.
2 years ago, the congressional district that Anthony Delgado won, I remember that race was quite pointed, and I don't recall hearing quite as much this time around. I saw some ads for Delgado, but I couldn't even tell you the name of.
I remember there was a congressional race where a guy by the name of Sweeney over in the Albany area was running, a Republican. He was an incumbent, and I believe he was arrested at a college fraternity party or something like that. And the ads were I don't know whatever happened to the race, but the opponent was more than willing to point out his presence at this college fraternity party.
Well, I guess we're getting near the end of our time here. Just wanted to find out, were there any new results that we haven't already talked about in any of these local races we've been following? The Bend 4. Well, I guess we sort of figured out the Bennington 4 race. That's been decided. But anything new in the state Senate numbers that the Secretary of State is passing along, or
let's take a quick look here
before we have to go?
I actually do want to say the Secretary of State's website is fantastic. All the data that you can drill down into, and you can go back. So whoever created this, I assume it's Jim Condos himself, but if it wasn't, whoever created this did a real nice job with it. It doesn't look like anything else other than Sunderland, Shaftesbury, and Searsburg. We know that the Arlington numbers and the Dorset numbers and the Manchester numbers, it does look like at this point that Dick Sears and Brian Campion, who run as a team, are probably going to get reelected at this point, especially with Bennington not weighing in yet.
So I was wondering, just to shift back to the state level, David Zuckerman had a tough night, but is his political future over in Vermont, or does he say, well, I had some bad luck in my timing, but maybe a year or two with the organic farm in Heinsberg, he can come back and try again, particularly if, let's say, Phil Scott follows the example of his predecessor, Peter Shumlin, and says, well, 3 terms, that's about all I really want to do. Plus, there's a Senate seat opening up in 2022. That might be a tempting thought. We could just sort of look ahead. But does he have any kind of basis for saying, hey, I still got some, some possibilities here? Or by then, there's so many other Democrats in the waiting room, so to speak. T.J. Donovan, the Attorney General, has been mentioned as a possible governor candidate. Mm-hmm. I'm sure there are others that are probably thinking it's my turn. Maybe even Tim Ash, who failed in the lieutenant governor race, but I'm sure he's still a relatively young guy, isn't ready to call it quits yet either.
I think I don't know what Jeff thinks or Cherise. I think it's tough to be relevant if you're not in office for 2 years. That's I think that people that lose elections and then want to come back again, I think that they struggle especially in a small state, to be relevant. Of course, you don't have to look back to Nixon to figure out that you can lose and come back again and win, and then have to resign from office, but that's a different story. I don't know. I think it's going to be tough for 2 years. 2 years is a long time.
Yeah, it's too early to tell. Who knows? He's a young guy. He's an active guy. I mean, back in the day, let's see, Shumlin was a state senator, ran for lieutenant governor. He lost to Doobie, and then he went back in the Senate, and then he ran for governor and won. So you just never know.
Oh, well. Well, I guess we'll have to leave it there on that note. Thanks, everyone, for being with us tonight. Once again, the pundit squad has come through brilliantly. Really want to thank Jeff Wilson, John O'Keefe, Cherise Forbes for pointing out the highlights and sharing their observations with us all. Really quite interesting to hear about it all and see where this is all going to wind up going. I hope everyone's enjoyed the show, and maybe we'll be back again in another 2 years to talk about whatever's going on in 2022. That seems like a very long way away. But you never know. Anyway, thanks again, panel. I really appreciate your time and your help with this. And to all those watching, hope you enjoyed the show. And well, I guess now we'll let you go on to CNN or Fox or wherever else you may think you need to go to, finish off the evening, or maybe just go to bed. That might be probably the smart thing to do, I guess. Anyway, all right. Well, thanks again, everyone. Have a great night. It'll be interesting to see where we're at in the morning.